All right. Welcome to Now That's Debatable. This is Fantastic Facade. I am extremely fortunate today because I have not only my typical co host, Geocentric Skeptic, joining us, but I also have a good buddy of mine who goes by Eben Shroud. He's going to be joining us as a guest speaker. Geo, can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. How about
How do you
you,
copy?
Evan? Are you there?
I'm here.
Perfect. If you could both, I'm going to mute myself, and if you don't mind just talking for a minute or so by yourself, that way I can ensure I can hear everyone in the stream, and we'll continue from there.
Sure.
All
All
right.
right. What's going on,
Still
Evan?
here. Not much. Been a nice
All
quiet
right.
day.
That's what's up, man.
How are you doing?
I'm chilling. We do this check. I think you heard that well, it's 2 weeks ago. We recorded a whole episode and you couldn't hear me at all.
Not
Oh
one
So
no.
word.
yeah.
But I did just check out our Twitch stream, and I can hear both of you. So, without too much further ado, I think we have our audio situation straight finally. And today we're going to be doing a interesting topic that's a little different than anything we've done before. So I'm excited for it because we don't want this show to be specific to like politics or religion or any one topic. We want to be very open. We want to promote
Do it
critical
all, baby.
thinking, and we want to be able to take on pretty much any topic that's out there. So for Geo and I, at least, this is going to be very new topic that was introduced to us recently. But for Eben, our guest speaker, he actually recommended the topic and is very familiar with it. And he's going to do a overview and introduction. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in chat, ask, give feedback, give comments, or call in. Our numbers should be flashing on the screen. It's 202 888 5350. That number is live and being monitored, and all three of us should be able to jump in and chat with you if you decide to call in. So, anything either of you want to add before we take off?
No, I'm good.
All right, let's get
Mm,
this started. Eben, if you don't mind, Skinwalker Ranch. Tell us a little bit about it and why you wanted to cover this topic.
All right. So it starts off with a long history, and the area itself is the Uint. Oh, I'm going to tear up the name, but it's an Indian tribe reservation. It's a basin. The ranch itself is about 480 acres, but the history starts off when the Spanish came over and the Uinta Indians learned of slavery, and they would take Navajo captured Indians and then sell them off into slavery. And the history and legend goes that the Navajo cursed them for their actions, and as a result, the Uinta tribe will not even go into those lands anymore due to the supposed curse. And it's called the Curse of the Skinwalker, which are basically witches as far as Navajo is concerned. People who voluntarily take upon themselves dark acts to get abilities. So that's where it started. And then it didn't enter until modern uh, parlance and conversations until a Sherman family of ranchers bought the ranch. I think it was around late 80s, early 90s. When they acquired the ranch, it had several homesteads on it that were dilapidated. One in particular that they moved into, everything on it was odd as far as how everything was secured. There was locks on the inside of doors and the outside of doors. Every door, including closets, doors, cupboards, pantries, everything had locks inside and out, which is very odd. And giant iron posts that you would tie large animals up to around the property. They thought nothing of that when they first moved in, and then they started having what people call supernatural, paranormal activities, uh, things moving around the property, and it was kind of subtle and didn't think much of it. And then they started to encounter weird creatures, giant wolves, cattle mutilations, and the whole gamut of craziness started to ensue. There's details therein, but after about 10 years, I don't know how exactly long of their stay, it got news. It made the news. George Knapp came out and interviewed them and saw the property, and they made a story about it. And then it got popular. And then Robert Bigelow, Bigelow Aerospace, who originally made his fame with Budget Suites of America, and he had big plans. He used to talking about a lot about even putting a hotel in space. And he honestly thought that there may be something uh, going on there. And he honestly thought that, hey, there might be aliens, and if there are aliens, I want that technology. And so he bought the property, spent millions of dollars, and then he hired a team of investigators called NIDS, the National Institute of Discovery Science, kind of like a team of X-Files and investigators to study that property, physicists, doctors, and in the 10 years they had the property, they could not prove anything. Nothing they could do could prove anything, but they were all experiencing weird episodes, which we'll get into. But after a decade, he sold the property to a real estate investor, another, I think he might be a billionaire as well, at least not, he's very wealthy. He bought the property as a skeptic and kept it under wraps. Basically, he owned it. And the History Channel approached him and wanted him to expose himself as the owner and to do a show with them. So it's actually second season's in production. They have a season out right now with the History Channel covering Skinwalker Ranch and his team of scientists and experiencers trying to isolate what is going on. The difference with Bigelow versus his stuff is public and going out wide. Bigelow's teams, a lot of their documents are sealed and considered top secret with the U.S. government. So something to be said for that, whatever the hell that is. So that's a brief overview of the time of what's going on now, and then we can get into all the curious details and events.
Gotcha.
How does that
Perfect.
work?
Absolutely. I appreciate it. And just to kind of delve into just a little bit more, from what I've seen and what I've gathered, this is probably, at least in the United States, considered the most active place in the United States for things like alien sightings, paranormal activity, ghosts, as far as number of people who have personally recorded their own activity with things of that nature or what they consider that nature. This area is undoubtedly the most densely populated for that reason. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I think it's even been said it is the biggest in the world as far as that kind of activity all happening in one spot.
Gotcha. And
There's others like it, but not to the same degree.
yeah, and from what I've seen, the history of this place goes back pretty far. And as far as like paranormal backslash alien activity, it only goes back about 50, 60 years. But the term skinwalker actually comes from the Native American beliefs, which is, from what I gathered, akin to like a shapeshifter. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that goes back long, long, long before any of this other stuff.
Right. And that is also a point of contention in the Native American tribes. While they believe in it, they don't talk about it because supposedly even discussing it or discussing it with outsiders brings unwanted attention of the skinwalkers upon people. And some argue that the Native Americans the Navajo themselves wouldn't make a deal with skinwalkers to curse the units because they wouldn't deal with such creatures or entities. But and again, they still admit that their tribes will not deal with that territory. They call the ridge around the property is called the Path of the Skinwalker, and you won't get the American Indians. The Native Americans will not approach across that area.
Gotcha. So there's quite a bit to potentially unpack here, because obviously I think most, if not all, of our contended points here could be their own episode or maybe even their own like entire series. But there clearly is something going on given the number of reports. So, uh, are you leaning towards aliens, ghosts, or just uh, hokey? What are your
Well,
thoughts?
my gut instinct, first off, is grifters. People trying to take advantage of other people with fame, with outlandish stories. That's the easiest thing. But there's some things that it's hard to explain, and everything you hear is a story from somebody with no evidence. Like there's evidence of the cattle mutilations, but there's no proof or evidence of the time lapse it took between these these cattle bodies being found. And though doctors and people have researched and looked into them, and all these variety of cattle mutilations all make no sense. The tools that were used make no sense. First, it's a no blood found make no sense. Those have eyewitness as far as the end results. Of course, there's no witnesses of the actual actions. Everything else, it's hard in and of themselves. You can isolate them as grifter stories, because someone could say, I tracked my cattle down, it left footprints, and then it was gone. Um, our bulls disappeared from the corral, but peered into a pen that was wired shut with cobwebs. There's no way they could have got in there. They were in a trance, and all of a sudden they woke up, and these bulls, you couldn't have gotten them in there, but yet they just appeared there in a few mere moments. But these stories can all be made up by the families or individuals involved. It's the pure number of stories which kind of lends some credence to something going on, because it's not just one family telling a story. It's many
So,
people that have been there.
did you say earlier that Robert Bigelow's research on that ranch was classified by the government?
Some of they're at final reports. A lot of it is still classified. They can't talk about it, which makes me bring the government involved.
So,
And to what degree?
so you're saying so the government classified his reports?
Some of his work was because he was working with the U.S. government, and so who knows the nature or the reasons for the? I mean, you might be able to find out the nature or reasons for some of the classifications, but some of the final reports that from when he left the property is sealed. But the individual researchers have talked about their experiences that they can talk about, but they've admitted there is stuff that has not been publicly known.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, if the government's classifying information, there may be more to it than the idea of something like aliens or ghosts. There may be uh, something like weapons and or aerospace testing. That was one of the really big things that was happening with like Area 51 in New Mexico. Is that you have Nellis Air Force Base over in Vegas, and you have Area 51, which is out in the middle of the desert, and it took until Google launched a satellite for GPS services before the government officially recognized Area 51 as a military base. So,
Exactly.
I mean, it took quite literally undeniable proof with satellite imagery before the government came out and said Area 51 existed, even though you could quite literally drive within a couple miles of it. And if you had a decent set of binoculars, you could look out and see these massive buildings surrounded by fences and armed guards that were quite obviously U.S. military. But
Right. And it wasn't until Bob
involved,
Lazar told the story of Area 51 that no one even knew the name.
yeah,
Do
And
you
even
know
after that,
Do you know
Go
what
ahead.
agency? Did you know what agency he was working with?
I do not know.
Classified? Okay.
I do not know, and it may not be that I didn't hear, but I don't know if I can even remember if I even heard it. But it's something they actually go look into. I didn't want to cover everything because I know we don't have time for that. But I just know that the government was involved to a small degree.
Because I see where it says he was asking Congress to get involved. I don't see where they actually got involved. At least not
Right?
with the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, you can't see exactly what part or anything they were involved in. Um,
How do we know it was
Wh-
classified?
from what I'm told from one of the many other people researching the topic, so I can't verify and prove that.
Okay.
Again, that comes back to another he said, she said with everything else on this whole.
Gotcha.
But that's something worth looking into, specifically Robert Bigelow's final report findings.
Yeah, I can tell you as far as Robert Bigelow is concerned, there was a video that surfaced in 2005 on YouTube from a U.S. naval aircraft called Tic Tac, and uh, it actually sparked and led to the most recent congressional finding on UFOs and the most recently unclassified or declassified document on UFOs that just happened last year. And
Right.
Robert Bigelow was kind of surrounding the head there of the Tic Tac video. And if you haven't seen it, easy to find. Just go on YouTube and type in UFO Tic Tac. Quite literally like the candy name, and you'll see some jets, and they're using their camera monitoring system and targeting system to follow this unknown aircraft or unknown flying object UFO, and it made pretty big headway back in 2005, and then last year when Congress was about to they made official announcement on UFOs because this declassified video from the U.S. Navy, as well as another video from the U.S. Navy involving unknown aircraft, came out, and ironically, Donald Trump had a lot to do with the declassification of this information. So it wasn't a very informative paper as far as the congressional release, because they like to use what I'll call government jargon. Basically, we'll obfuscate everything that we possibly can in this government document by saying it's public information now. So they don't.
Are you talking about the
Advanced
Aerospace Threat Identification Program?
Not specifically. I'm talking about the actual congressional release of information regarding UFOs that came out last year. I can look up the name of the document if you'd like.
Yeah, I see the name of the program though. It was made public in 2017.
Yeah, that's ATIP.
This particular one, it was unpublicized, but it wasn't classified. Not from this one that I see.
Yeah, there was stuff with Harry Reid in Nevada and ATIP, and he was a big. Senator Harry Reid was a big launcher, push from behind to get ATIP and other surrounding programs going. Which, if you really want to look into ATIP and find out more about it, look up Lou Elizondo. And wow, there's a lot to go on. Gotcha. He was the head of ATIP for a while, and he's now telling all that he can tell without breaking his non-disclosures.
So you don't actually believe that it was actually some paranormal or terrestrial thing. You kind of think it was just trolls.
Well, I mean say,
that not in a literal sense, obviously. I mean,
yeah, you got to be careful. Well, yeah, hucksters, grifters, people like to take advantage of people. That would be the easiest way to go to. It's the reason why I can't go there. Just say it's that is because there's too many people with too many. Now, I'm not one for grand conspiracies. I'll accept small conspiracies, but I can't see hundreds of people all on the same bandwagon, unless maybe they're being paid and organized, and it is a grand conspiracy to make this, this all be BS. But let's keep the interest going and keep it focused. There's too much going on for it to be lots of different people making up stories. While plenty of them could still be made up, but I wouldn't see a billionaire dumping millions into a property if he didn't think there was something, even the smallest of something.
And although,
well, to be fair, he kind of has a history of researching. Robert Bigelow, it looked like he has a history of just researching pseudosciences.
He does.
You agree?
He does.
Yeah. I agree.
Let me two things. Just one to insert something relevant to that, and then two, I pulled up the actual document involving the unidentified aerial phenomena. But one, the location, although Geo knows, and anyone who watches this may know that I'm skeptical in general, pretty much about anything. I would like to lend credence to the idea that this place is in the middle of nowhere. There's no major city within miles and miles and miles. And prior to Robert Bigelow and Fugel, who is the current owner, I believe, of
Yes.
Skinwalker Ranch, the Shermans who owned it literally had to like take travel time into consideration to go get supplies from like the nearest town, because even though they were running their own cattle farm and the like primary Sherman was had a degree in animal husbandry and they were really good farmers and ranch hands, they didn't have any supplies nearby, so they had to
Right.
to drive excess of 20 miles to get to a town to get supplies for their farm, which in and of itself doesn't seem that important. But as far as lending credence to like a whole bunch of people just showing up here unannounced or unaware or being able to slip in and out, it kind of takes a little bit of that opportunity away, because it's so far away that it would seem impractical if it was just like a practical jokester or huckster, especially given that this is just some private farm in Utah. It'd be different if it was like
That's a,
a government organization or some major city in which there's millions of people and you'd never be able to notice one person slipping in and out. When you're 20, 30 miles away and you have a 400 plus acre ranch, you kind of notice when someone's on your road, you know? Geo
right.
knows I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and you could hear cars for miles because there's nothing around.
So
So,
let's focus on like what incident, like what's the most shocking incident that we would say is just hardest to explain. Let's narrow
well,
it down.
I don't know that I could give one based off of the information I've seen, but I would say the incredible number of sightings of things like UFOs in the area kind of lend
So
credence to that.
for me, sighting of UFOs, that's not that particularly impressive, especially if you're dealing with people who have no expertise with flying objects, right? They see something strange in the sky, something that they're not familiar with. Okay, that's I mean that's not that surprising. I mean, I've seen things in the sky all the time that I don't know what it is. Uh,
Right, but
like I mean,
I feel like there's a difference in you looking up in the sky and me looking up in the sky and being like, oh, that's a helicopter. Oh, that's a jet. Oh, that's a blimp. Oh, I've never seen any object that looks like that before.
And move
I
like
mean,
that.
yeah, I mean, like, even though, you know me and I'm a skeptic, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I
mhm.
think the point is when you have hundreds, if not thousands, of individual people coming forth to say, there's a strange, moving, glowing object that moves in a way that I've never seen any other aircraft move. It reacts and acts in a way I've never seen any other aircraft move.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, but I
I'm
mean,
no
these people. I
expert
mean,
on it.
how many aircrafts have they seen?
I
So,
mean,
like for me,
even if
for me to
even if we've
say
only
I
seen
saw an
a
aircraft
dozen or
moving in a
so.
way I've never seen.
Yeah, but how many aircraft would you need to see to say that you've seen them all? Because I
I
mean,
don't
you
know.
have helicopters which have vertical takeoff. You have Harriers which have vertical takeoff. If you've never seen one, just Google it. It's really neat. But then you have pretty much small aircraft and jets, and they all, with exception of the Harrier and helicopter, all virtually move in the same way.
That's why I want to get specific. Like, what type of movement was it doing that was so unfamiliar to
Similar
these
to the
people?
Tic Tac.
Yeah. So
Non-ballistic movement patterns. So
yeah,
instantaneous stop, instantaneous start, hover, up and down at great speeds.
moving
Okay,
like
cool.
out
So
of
how?
pattern at
So
ridiculous speed was what I've seen as being recorded. Like being able to almost not
you got
instantly
videos of
because
this?
there's well, I mean the Tic Tac video from 2005, and then there was an additional video in 2008 that was recorded by the U.S. Navy, but not from like specific
Hey,
viewers
from the
in
Skinwalker
Utah.
Ranch?
No, we don't have video from the ranch.
No.
Okay, so we're just talking about UFOs.
Well,
Well,
I mean, we're talking
That's what I
about, you asked
the story from the
specifically.
ranch matched the other UFO stories that people talk about they see other places. We're just saying that the ranch has got a lot of them.
Yeah, you
And
asked specifically for
Gotcha,
something
so-
at the ranch that was like the most pronounced, and I would say
So
from the research that I've done, the most pronounced thing that keeps coming up over and over and over again at Skinwalker Ranch is orb and or UFO sightings. There seems to be hundreds, if not thousands, of reports from individual people at different times from different locations near this area that describe similar events and activity that happens to coincide with things like the Tic Tac video and the 2008 video that was released from the U.S. Navy and declassified.
how did he know that object is flying?
Well, the same way you would look in the sky and know an aircraft is flying. You can tell
No,
by
that
its
wouldn't.
movement
So
pattern.
no, like I mean, if I see an aircraft, I presume that it's flying. But if it's an object that I don't know what it is,
And
I
it's
wouldn't
moving
necessarily
through
know
the
that it's
air.
flying.
And
Yeah, exactly.
maneuvering
Something moving
and
through the air. Something moving through the air. I mean, I got a laser on my rifle that's powerful enough for someone to see, and you can wave it around, and
Okay, but
it'll move in a non-ballistic pattern.
and
So what
anyone with half a brain would be able to look at it and say, "Oh, that's obviously a light source," versus, "Oh, this is clearly a physical object moving in a
Maybe
particular pattern."
maybe or maybe not. Like we don't have these witnesses. We don't know how familiar they are with these
Now,
objects.
I'm skeptical to
What
the
I'm saying
point
is
where you
just
are,
because
but
something's in
don't.
the air.
I
Something
think you're
moves-
taking it to the point of ludicrousness, where you have literally over 1,000 people saying they saw something similar, and you're saying maybe they just saw a laser. Like,
No,
I
what
don't
I'm
think you should
saying is
discredit
something in the
people's.
air. No, I'm not saying it. Maybe they just saw a laser. What I'm saying is something in the air moving doesn't. It is presumptuous to assume that it is flying.
Well,
You were just looking.
yes
you asked
and
for an
no.
example, and I gave you a really easy one right off the top of my head.
Well, no, because I could clearly distinguish between a light source and a flying object. There's no way you would be able to fool me with a laser, like compared to like a F-22. It's just
Except,
you're
you know
not
how
gonna do
lasers
it.
Work? Except, like for example, lasers. Like the reason you be able to see the beam is because it's hitting matter on the way up. If you
Well,
could,
it's hitting particles
could
in
do-
the air, and I'm actually seeing the reflection of light off the particles in the air. That's
yes, if it
or
didn't hit,
it's
if it
bouncing
didn't
off
hit
an
anything
object.
into the if you would have shine a laser in a vacuum, you wouldn't see anything until it hits the wall.
That's correct. So I'm seeing
So
the light source
What I'm-
bouncing off particles of air
yeah, what I'm saying
versus
is
seeing
we
something
have-
like a jet.
So what I'm saying is we don't know
Clearly
the
different.
atmosphere. We don't know the atmospheric conditions, like or anything. That's why it's so difficult.
I'm
when
still
we're
gonna
speaking in
just
generality.
lean really, even though I'm pro skepticism, I'm gonna lean really hard on the idea that you could never fool me with a light. It's just not gonna happen. You would never once convince me that a laser or powerful flashlight or light source
You haven't
is
seen
the
enough
same
lasers.
as a ship.
Yeah, you haven't seen enough lasers. Like, did you ever see that Tupac performance from like
Yeah, the
5 or
minor
6 years ago?
hologram performance that took like
Yeah.
$10,000 and then kind of looked like Tupac. Yeah, I did watch that, and you have to be within very close proximity, and you have to have a physical object to bounce that light
it
off
didn't
of.
kind of look like Tupac. Like it was like
It was a
photons
hologram,
emitting
essentially a
heat. Yeah,
hologram.
that's what I'm saying. So we don't have no idea what type of technology was available. I mean, to assume that you couldn't be fooled by this, there is no
Yeah, yeah. You
technology
remember how I
involving
looked at that image
electromagnetic
of
waves that could
Tupac
fool
and I
you.
knew it wasn't Tupac? It wasn't because Tupac was dead. It's because it didn't look like a
Because it was
human.
glowing. Well, you could tell by
It- it-
you could tell
yeah,
by the fact that
yeah,
it was
I can
glowing.
instantly
It was
tell a
emitting light.
hologram from a human. It's weird.
Yeah, but here we are. We're talking about an object that is way up in the air. That you're you're not going to presume that this is some sort of performance that's going on for you. You just see a glowing object in the air.
I
It's a
see
mistake. It's a
a-
mistake to assume that it's flying.
it's not.
And it's also it's presumptuous to assume that you couldn't be fooled by it. Like you have
It's
no idea the
not.
technology that's out there.
But it's not. So I mean, just like I could clearly point out the fact that it was a hologram. Like it's not silly to trust your senses on something so simple. I can
It's
tell the
not so,
difference
but
between
this isn't simple because they had no idea what it was.
right, but you can clearly tell, like, if
So,
I looked up
so
in the sky
if
and
you
I
have
saw
no
a
idea
helicopter at a distance,
I mean,
I don't have to
if-
be able to tell you the model of the helicopter.
no, no,
I
no,
can
no.
just
If you
say,
have no
oh,
idea,
it's a
if you have no
helicopter.
idea what something is, how in the name of common sense can you tell what it isn't? How can you
Okay.
say this
If
is
I look in
definitely
the
not
sky
laser.
and I
This
see
is definitely
a black hole, but I'm not sure, I wouldn't presume it's a star or a bug or a mousetrap because none of those things make sense. I would presume, given that it looks like a black hole, that it might be a black hole or something akin to a black hole. But I would never assume it's a flying air conditioner.
okay. So obviously you could rule out things that would be impossible. What I'm saying
Okay,
is, you're
so
saying
by
no, no,
doing
you're,
so,
you're saying
I can
there's no
I can
way it's
include and
electromagnetic
preclude
waves.
certain things.
No. Here's an object that there's flying around, right? And it's
No,
moving in
you're assuming it's
moving
flying
in
around.
hold on. Let me finish. Hold on. Let me finish. It's moving in non-ballistic patterns, and you're saying it is definitely not electromagnetic waves. How are you saying that?
I'm saying based off of every experience I've ever had with electromagnetic waves and ships, including aircraft, that I would be able to distinguish between something like a hologram and a physical ship or aircraft.
Yeah, I'm telling
I
you,
would like to
that's
jump in for a
that's a
second
mistake.
to your point about the electromagnetic. This is also considered one of the hot spots on the continental United States for electromagnetic phenomenon. There's a huge amount of electromagnetic issues going on there. So could it be something electromagnetic of any place in the U.S.? I say this to be the most likely location.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see it at all, it's definitely interacting with electromagnetic waves. I mean, that's exactly what photons are. So, I mean, I just
I'm
don't
just
see
saying-
how we can rule out that this is.
I'm just saying.
I'm still not convinced that it's even flying. To me,
I'm
Okay.
just saying. To
that's
me,
still-
that's
still a very
something that
hasty
you should be
conclusion.
able to almost
and-
clearly point out.
And to say that you can't be fooled based off personal anecdotes, namely, you just haven't seen that before. I mean, that's a serious error in reasoning, in my opinion.
Well, a lot of the
I-
researchers that were there did have experience in the military.
I
And
mean,
plenty
like,
of them have seen many different types of things flying. Now, that's
that-
not all 1,000 witnesses.
So, okay,
that
so
aside-
that lends credibility to it.
Well, how so? Because it could be something they've never seen before either. We're not.
It could be. But
I mean,
it could be, but it presumably they would see more things than the civilian population, especially like some farmers out in the middle of nowhere.
yeah.
I mean,
but
like some of this technology, like I literally work with. I remember when I was down in where was I? I think it was in Fort Pickett one time, and they saw this object moving really fast. And they were like, "There's no way that's an airplane," and I was able to pick it out. It's a satellite. You could actually see them from here.
Mhm.
So I mean, and I knew that just because of the stuff that I've learned just from um, my job in the army. I'm not gonna say what I do, but like I was able to pick
Well,
out, hey, this is a satellite.
to
So
his point, though, is that there's not a lot of civilization in the area. It's really isolated.
mhm.
So the I think that means the odds of, for one thing, hoaxsters um, trying to make stuff up. I mean, you're not going to get a big bang for your buck if you're trying to fake something. I'm just saying, for that many incidents of weird occurrences, that
Mhm.
seems like an awfully high expenditure for a low effect, a low draw. You're not going to get a big bang for your buck. So I wouldn't think you'd spend that time and energy to fake something. But there still is something that people don't recognize, whatever it is, flying or not. And then that means who or what could be producing such said effects. Are they naturally occurring? Are they extraterrestrial, extra dimensional, or is it just our government testing something? And now, an area far away from prying eyes,
so
that would be a great place to test things.
Also,
so
just to really
as far
play devil's advocate for 2 seconds, because it bugs me, and it's me, and both of you know me well enough to know that I'm not going to let it go. There's no way you could have known it was a satellite according to your own definition, because you can't trust your own senses. It could have been a hologram.
I didn't say you couldn't trust your own senses. You were
You couldn't
saying
have
you
you couldn't
know
have
that
told
it's
me you
flying,
couldn't have told
and
me
I
it
was
was a
saying,
flying
how could you rule
object.
that out? I never say I couldn't tell you.
You couldn't prove
I couldn't say
that
what.
was a flying object according to your own
Yes,
like
yes, you
argument.
could.
You couldn't have. You couldn't
No,
trust that you
I
knew
knew
that
what
that
the
was.
object was. No, no, no,
No,
no,
no,
no.
no, no. You
You're
assumed
twisting
what it
things.
was.
No, 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 no. The,
You assumed what it
these people,
was.
no, 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 no. These people saw an object and said, "I have no idea what this is,
Okay,
but
but
it's
there's a
flying."
difference in me saying
That is
I
total
don't know that.
nonsense. If you agree with that, is totally irrational. That makes no sense at all.
Let's
It-
pause. By saying I don't know what something is doesn't mean I don't have good evidence or clues as to what it could be. Just because I
I
don't
didn't
know the
say that.
specific aircraft
I
number
asked you, how would you know that it's
or call
flying? And
number.
you just said it was in the air.
No, no, no,
That's
no,
not. That
no,
makes
no,
no
no.
sense.
That's part of knowing something is flying by it being in the air. I mean, the definition of flying is traveling through the air.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it kind of is.
No, if I take a ball from a building and drop it, it's traveling through the air. It's not flying.
Yeah, it is until it hits the ground.
No, it's you think a ball that is falling towards the ground is flying till it hits the ground.
It's falling and using gravity. So I guess
Okay, you
flying has some sort of propulsion system, or perhaps its
you have a
own
non-standard
own
definition
movement.
of flying.
Nonetheless,
you have a non-
I wouldn't describe the ball as flying, but if you hit the ball with a baseball bat, I would say it flew through the air. But obviously, that's a non-typical definition of
that's a figure
flying.
of speech, but you're not saying it's literally flying. Like when I
Correct.
play basketball and I take a
I could-
shot, I'm not flying.
I can distinguish the fact and like of something like an aircraft versus something like a light source. That's what I'm trying to point out.
And what
Is
I'm
that
pointing
I've
out
seen
is
enough
what I'm
aircraft.
pointing out is if you're saying you don't know what it is, so you don't know if it's an aircraft and you don't know if it's a light source. You're saying you don't know what it is. So how are you
Okay.
ruling out the fact that it's a light source that is not flying?
I'm ruling out the fact that it's not flying by the clear evidence of flight. It's moving under either
and what's
its
the evidence of
own
that? 'Cause,
source.
Like you didn't see it. You're speaking for some people that we have no names.
I'm
You're
saying
speaking for-
if I were a witness, I'm not saying I've actually seen some flying object. I'm saying if I were a witness at this location and I saw a flying object, I would clearly say it's a flying object.
You're begging a question. You're saying if you saw a flying object, okay, whether or not it's flying is what we're trying to figure out.
If I saw an object
If it's not flying,
that
what's it
appeared to
doing?
be, let me clarify, and we'll go
that's
from
what I was
there, and then
pointing
can
out.
stop.
So you can take
let me
a satellite
clarify.
is not flying.
You're correct.
A
But
laser.
you might describe
is
it
not
as
flying.
flying. If I looked up in the sky and I saw a satellite, I might describe it as flying. I don't think many people would have an issue with that. Although technically incorrect, it's technically orbiting the Earth.
I mean, you could describe it that way, but we know it definitely wasn't satellite because satellites don't make non-ballistic changes in
trajectory.
Just to kind of get off, but just to kind of get this point across, is that if I looked up and I saw what appeared to be a large metallic object, which appeared.
Did the witnesses say it was metallic?
Let me finish. I'm giving you a complete hypothetical. I'm giving you a complete hypothetical. Please let me finish.
Okay.
If I were at this place in Utah and I personally witnessed what appeared to me to be a metallic or plastic or some sort of synthetic object that happened to look kind of like an aircraft, and it appeared to be moving in its own pattern and own method under its own action. So it wasn't being controlled by another object. To my knowledge, it wasn't like a crane just lifting up this object and moving it around. It seemed to be moving under its own propulsion or own system at speeds comparable or exceeding that of other known aircraft that I have seen with my own eyes. And there have been a lot of them because I've been to a lot of places and I've flown on quite a few. I've been to military bases. I've seen quite a few. But more importantly, based on all these things that I have seen, and I say it's comparable or exceeding most, if not all, of those things, and seems to be doing it under its own volition, I would assume it's a flying object.
Yeah,
and that may be an incorrect assumption.
A bunch of things that I don't think they said. Like, so if they saw a metallic object that looked like a plane and it was air flying, I don't think they would call it a UFO.
No, that's exactly what most people describe UFOs as. They would say it's a flying saucer.
Okay. Evan, did the witnesses say did they describe the object as metallic and resembling a plane?
I know a lot of the reports were like dark objects in the sky that had light sources emanating from them. Some were actually light sources in and of themselves from some descriptions.
So now, if it was they didn't describe it as metallic and resembling a plane.
I'm not saying none of them did. I'm just saying from what I can recall.
I didn't hear that either. That's why I don't know where we're going with.
Well, some of them were like objects. They were objects that had emitted light sources. Sometimes the light sources appeared and disappeared, but they could still see the shape at a distance that appeared to be flying. And then at times they thought they were a jet coming in, like a military jet flying in, but then it just stopped. And then it went straight up, and then it just shut off again.
Just for fun, I just Googled it real quick. There's News 2 from Utah says interviewed with a guy in 2021, last year, and he said he identified as what could only be described as an unidentified flying object that was 40 to 50 foot long, silver disc-like, and hovering. So he described it as metallic and hovering.
That's not resembling a plane. You're saying silver disc-like. I mean, that's like your typical alien.
Typical UFO.
See, like in the movies.
Yeah, it's like aircraft-esque. But more importantly, he described it as silver and a solid object. So, I mean, like, this is something that he's clearly defining as
this was
potentially metallic. And
this was at the Skinwalker Ranch?
Yes, this was at the Skinwalker Ranch. This is a news interview from last year interviewing someone who described it that way. Now, I'm not saying everyone did or everyone does. I'm just saying if someone described something as such, you have that as an option. And there are so many things to unpack with Skinwalker Ranch.
Of course, it's an option, but what I'm saying is you can't just make the assumption that it is.
I'm not saying you should.
I never ruled out whether or not it was flying. Like,
but you just discounted it altogether.
No, I didn't.
And that was my issue with
it. I never discounted it. I was saying, how do you know that it's flying?
I'm saying still got to go ahead.
If it's not flying, then what is the other option?
I'm not saying it isn't flying. I'm saying we don't know if it is flying.
Well, I know, but I'm saying, but what else could it be? Otherwise, it is.
Well, until we get more specific. Well, no. We can't say it is flying until that's until we figure out what it is doing. That's an argument from ignorance. I don't have to assume that it's flying until I
Well,
figure out what it is doing.
that's a default position for most of humanity if they see something shooting across the sky. So if it's not
Most
flying,
humanity,
bit.
most humanity aren't familiar with logical fallacies. That's the
Unfortunately,
it's not.
I have to
You
agree
can't
with
say that
Gio
it's,
here. We can't just assume that it's flying just because that might be default idea or concept. However, I think we spent a lot of time on this particular concept, and I think there's still a lot to uncover, and we have about
Sure, let's move
14
on.
minutes to do it.
Let's move on. But the is there I know you said earlier you couldn't think of one particular thing that is the most troubling or like the strangest thing. Like, give me the first thing that would come to your mind, like someone who's very skeptical of of this. What would you say to convince them that there is some sort of strange thing
I mean,
happening at the farm?
based off of my research, and I'd love to have Evan's opinion here because he's done a lot more research than I have. But the sheer number indicates that, if at worst, something strange is going on, because there's been so many individual reports over years and years and years, and unfortunately, they cover such a range of things, from people presuming or assuming paranormal activity, people assuming or presuming things like aliens and UFOs, people presuming and assuming things like ghost, or even going back further to where Skinwalker Ranch gets its name, Native American history and Native American, I don't want to say mythology, but I'll say Native American
Folklore?
historicity, in which they describe things such as shapeshifters or people changing forms into things that we would refer to kind of like today as a modern werewolf. So given the sheer number, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's hard to say the one because it's not the fact that there's one. It's the fact that there's many and that they're really different. So there's the dogmen that people claim to see. There is the 6-foot tall dog that chased a lady in a car who had to kneel its head down to see in. Of course, she could be lying. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying there's a lot of people who see these dogmen. Then there's a lot of people who see these orbs. Then there's a lot of people who see the UFOs. There's a lot of people that see these discs appear, which apparently at midnight they can see a disc that looks like it's a clear, sunny sky on the other side, as if it's some dimensional portal. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that these are claims. But each one of them have multiple backing supposed viewers that say they've seen these. And then there's the cattle mutilations. Now, the after effects are obvious, and that's been recorded. There's lots of videos. And we can only believe the accounts of the people beforehand that they were there. There's no drips of blood. They've had scientists explore and experiment upon these remains, and they found nothing that makes sense. One in particular was a guy that found a cow.
What did it make sense about the mutilated cow?
Okay, for one, precision scientific tools, no blood left behind, and the time frame that the animal was out of line of sight was like less than a half an hour, but there's no tracks on the ground, no vehicle prints, no human footprints, no animal predation prints, no nothing, but you've got a carcass that was just a live animal half an hour prior, and there's no blood on the ground. That no matter what you are, who you are, that's weird, and there's multiples of those. One instance of a guy saw a cow, I forget of its age, but it was nervous and it was in a gully and it was acting erratic, but it was okay. And he said, I'll come back to it. I've got this calf. I need to get to its mother. So he goes, he's about 10 minutes away, returns it to its mother, comes back. He's gone 20 minutes. The cow that was in the gully is now dead, laying on its side. He approaches it, goes down. It's got a hole bored into its anus, and the inside, all of its organs are gone. And there is no blood, nothing, no footprints. There's a lot of stories of that. So you've got a lot of these really weird mutilations. You've got a lot of the UFO. You've got a lot of cryptid, Skinwalker kind of visitations. And then there's the poltergeist activity. I'll just cover a couple of those. The lady unpacks her groceries, goes into the other room. 5, 10 minutes later, comes back. All the groceries are now put back. There's no one in the house but her. That's odd. Every day she goes to take a shower, she has her towel and I think a hairbrush, and she comes out of the shower, it's gone. No one else in the house, but she finds those in like closets or drawers in some completely place, and it happens over and over again. And those aren't malevolent, but more mischievous, and they keep happening to her. And again, those can be made up stories just very easily. But it's just that it's not just one person reporting these, multiple people reporting all of these. And that's where you get this huge number of different, yet still similar stories with people. And the most recent amount of information, if you're curious, especially for the electromagnetic issues, and unfortunately it's the History Channel, which doesn't have a lot of faith anymore, but they've got Brian Fugel's ex-team there, and they've got people on the site videotaping this, so they have some live footage of some weird activity going on, especially sending atmospheric balloons and trying to test, and they're testing gravity waves. And what they've seemed to notice, again, since there's money to be made from being on the History Channel, all of this can be taken with a grain of salt. But it seems to be a parabolic effect within the whole. Matter of fact, if you took a look, the basin itself seems to be an upside down parabolic dish. And they're noticing that all of the gravity stuff seems to highlight at a certain elevation above the ridge line and at a certain center point, almost as if you were to send radio signals from a dish where everything would line up. What the hell that means, or where you want to, that's a rabbit hole to go down in and of itself. But that's why it's hard to focus on the one incident, because that's the thing. There's not one. It's too many different ones. And again, if this was a populated area, it'd be a bang for your buck to fool people. But why would you be fooling this much effort to fool people in the middle of nowhere? That's what gets me.
I mean, pranksters. I mean, you were saying earlier, it would make more sense to do it in a highly populated area. Like, for me, it's actually the reverse. And, like, I live right outside of the DMV area. There's a lot of people around here. Pulling a prank off like that around here, where at any moment there's going to be thousands of people watching you, it'd be much more difficult. It'd be much easier
to get away from it.
Yeah, in a ranch in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm not saying it wouldn't be easier, because there'd be obviously less people to catch you in the act. But I'm saying, as far as impact goes, you have the middle of nowhere Utah, where even though there's quite literally thousands of these unique stories, you might get one segment of one portion of your local news and maybe 100 people read it. Whereas if you're able
you get enough reports, it'll get it famous, right? And
well, I mean, Skinwalker Ranch is very famous.
Channel, like it
did. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Skinwalker Ranch is very famous.
But that's my point.
So, yeah, but I mean, I agree. I think as far as my personal take on the matter, I think obviously, at least as far as the upper echelons, and when I say that, I mean the owners of this ranch, especially the most recent very wealthy millionaire / billionaire owners, may have been using this publicity to try to cash in and make extra money through things like the History Channel or government funding and or government research, etc. I think that's undoubtedly likely. I just also think there is obviously something very strange with the sheer number of people reporting these unique, either unexplainable or strange scenarios and coincidences that
now they don't.
It seems that, like,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No worries. I was just saying, it just seems that, like, there's so many, and they're so kind of not necessarily related, but so just outside of the norm, that maybe people like Robert Fugel, or whatever his first name is, Fugel, and Bigelow are making money or made money off of it. But it seems like these Joe Blows that are giving their random report of my groceries went back to their bags, they're not going to make a dime off of it. Why would it matter to them? So that's just, I mean, just even though obviously I'm skeptic, and I'm a skeptic in general, and I'm skeptical of things, and I would take the skeptical viewpoint, having so many strange reports from this specific area does lend at least the credence of there may be some sort of mass conspiracy or something.
Yeah, I mean, I see a bunch of a bunch of claims with little evidence backing it, like and a bunch of bad evidence, right? Even in the aggregate, a pile of it together, right? A bunch of bad evidence doesn't give you good evidence, even if it's
Right.
a lot of it.
That's
I
true.
I agree 100%. I'm not discounting that. I just I mean there's
Hey, MJ,
obviously
I'm sorry,
some strange
MJ, no.
weird, if nothing else, that there's a, a concept or idea that these people are holding on to, that there's something special about this place. Now, that means nothing to anyone who's not from that place or hasn't heard of it, because I hadn't heard of it until about a week ago. But it still gives, even if it's bad evidence, there seems to be just a lot of reports that keep coming up and keep happening. And I get bad evidence doesn't give good evidence. It just seems that if you have enough individuals coming forward to say something happened, you may not be able to explain exactly what it is or even, lend much credence to it. But the more people that come forward, the more likely you are to pay attention to it, the more likely something actually happened versus a bunch of people making up something similar.
Right. The odds of it being made up go down with each passing, with the passage of time, and more stories keep appearing. Now, that's also possible that more people try to expand the shenanigans that are going on. But some of these events and some of these, they're hard to explain. And you only have to have one impossible thing to explain.
You know, for me, the fact that the stories are similar kind of gives credence to the notion that it's a prank. 'Cause I mean, it's not like the pranksters would come up with a new method every time they do it, right? So if they try one thing and it fooled somebody, they're going to try that a bunch of times. Like it's going to be their mo,
Yeah, I mean,
wouldn't it?
I mean, potentially so. I mean, I'm not gonna say I can lend my mind to the ideas of, you know, pranksters and hucksters, especially involving this specific area. But yeah. I mean, I could see obviously that side of the argument. The other side is that there's so many unique things that have happened that are what people might describe as like paranormal or alien involved or cryptoid, that like it seems that you're to the point here where you can almost make up anything and people will believe it. So why bother continuing to do so for such a small population unless you're at the top making money? And I'm not saying people wouldn't do it just for the heck of it, because God knows people do whatever they want for whatever reason. It just,
Some of that
like,
stuff would be expensive to pull off.
yeah, I mean, like the cattle mutilation
It-
stuff, the crop circle stuff, the orb stuff, like stuff that we have physical evidence of, seems that it would be less likely to be a prankster or a huckster than something that perhaps we just don't have a good answer to right now.
I'm
Not
not going to be
saying that lends
specific because I
credence.
don't want to incriminate ourselves on a podcast, but just think about some of the dumb stuff that we pulled off in college.
Well,
You know,
I'm not saying that people don't do dumb stuff. I'm just saying even if we were wealthy, which we weren't, we probably wouldn't spend a lot of money mutilating a cow and trying to figure out how to get its blood somewhere else without any trace.
yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
maybe.
I'm just saying. I
Yeah.
don't think either of us would ever come to that idea or concept.
No.
But I mean, maybe. But I don't necessarily see that happening. And even then, like, why? So
I mean, why did we do
anything that we ever
did?
did? Yeah, good question. Because we were young and stupid. Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a ton to cover. I think there's undoubtedly weird stuff, and stuff that maybe not anyone or not everyone can explain. And the good, the bad, and the ugly of something like Skinwalker Ranch is that because it's personal experience, most of it, that it's really hard to give any credence to any individual story. I think where the credence comes in and where it leans in and where it makes this more interesting than any single person's personal story is that there's a bunch of them that are all kind of unique and random and unexplainable and or unexplained, and they just happen to fall within proximity of this location. Now, not saying that people aren't utilizing that to gain their own publicity or whatever. It just seems that given the sheer number and the weird things that people are reporting, that perhaps there's something going on, be it government or something just we don't know or explain, or some advanced technology that some country is testing, whatever. There seems to be at least credence for something beyond your typical just small time hoax. That doesn't mean that I believe there's anything really important or that there's this huge government conspiracy or that there's military testing or anything else. It just means that given all the things and all the reports and all this other stuff, it's at least worth taking a few minutes to critically think about, because there's something there that at least the people that have personally witnessed these events can't explain. And that doesn't mean that it's good evidence for anything or it excludes or precludes anything else. It just means that given that we're dedicated to thinking critically, and I think all three of us kind of go into the idea of skepticism and go in with, let's take it with a grain of salt because it could just be people trying to make money. If anyone's watching, or if anyone watches in the future, and you have this personal experience, it's not that we're just trying to throw out everything. It's that we're going into this with, just because you can't personally explain it doesn't make it aliens or ghost or paranormal. And it doesn't mean we think you're also a hoax or trying to make money. It just means that we're kind of, at least my 2 cents on the matter is that we're trying to think critically about this, and there's a lot going on here. And if you happen to be a person that has an experience of this area, or your own experience not in this geographic area, please let us know or call in on the next show and we can kind of talk about it and go from there. But even if it's something you can't personally explain, doesn't give good evidence for something else. That's kind of the long and the short of it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, this was fun, guys.
Sounds like you got a yelling kid in the background.
Yeah, she keeps running in and out.
Yeah, heard that. Well, this was an interesting one, and I mean, we can definitely take on other stuff like this in the future. If anyone's watching and you have a suggestion, please let us know. Wanted to give a huge thank you to Eben for joining us and kind of introducing us to the topic and letting us take on this one and think critically about it.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you,
We
guys.
saw a random comment come up in the chat on YouTube, but it was from some maybe Russian. I don't know. I couldn't read it, so I just didn't bother.
I saw it.
Yeah,
Vu Rent.
Yeah, I didn't. I couldn't read it, so I didn't bother. But if anyone was watching, and next time, say hello in chat. We're gonna try to keep to the strict schedule of Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and we may have guest callers like Eben on again in the future, or additional callers and whatnot. Anything else either of you wanted to add while I move to our closing screen?
I would just tell everybody, keep an open mind and yet be attentive of what's going on.
I agree with that 100%. I think keeping an
Same.
open mind is important. I think thinking critically about things is more important. But having an open mind lends itself to thinking critically, because without having an open mind, it just means that you can't think critically because your mind's already made up.
Exactly.
Although I'm not a huge fan of him personally, Adam Savage from Mythbusters gave one of my favorite quotes of all time. He said, "My mind's made up. Don't confuse me with the facts." I think that's a really good, interesting, and anti method of learning.
Yeah, probably tongue in
Right?
cheek, but
Yeah, I think the opposite should be true. Please, if you are not paying attention to the facts, don't make up your mind yet.
Right? Pay attention.
Yeah. Gio, you got anything for us?
oh, that's it. I'm good.
I think next week we're going to try to tackle cryptocurrency. We've been preparing for it, and we were fortunate enough to have Evan on this week, so we changed things up. But Evan, did you want to add in anything?
No, I think that's it. It was good to talk to you guys.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. Well, thank you guys for watching. Now that's debatable. Feel free to check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Twitch. We're going to be doing this regularly on Tuesdays, so feel free to give us a comment, leave us a question. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback,